In the modern world, in the last 100 years or more, there have, in fact, over the last several hundred years, there have been a great many translations produced. I'd like to recommend one particular one. The translation I'll be using in this course is a translation by Richmond Lattimore, and it's still available. It's still in print, published by University of Chicago Press. Richmond Lattimore's translation is admirable for a number of reasons. One of them is that he not only faithfully renders the ideas, but he faithfully renders the feel of the Greek. The meter of the original poem is called dactylic hexameter. The dactylic part means that every foot in each line is composed of a long and then two short syllables, almost exactly like music in which a measure is comprised of a half note and two quarter notes. A long syllable and then two short syllables. And if there's 6 of those feet in the line, then we have hexameter, hex meaning 6. So dactylic hexameter is a description of the kind of line that Homer used. Now I'll read a little bit of the original Greek so that you can hear what the dactylic hexameter sounds like. Mein enaid thea pele iadau achilleos, ulamanein he muria chaios alge atheken, pallas difthimus psuchas aidi proiapsen heiroon, autus de heloria tauchekunessen oenoisi te data, diaste te lea tabule, exudeta prota diaste te neresanta, atre desta anaxandron kai dias achillos. Well, there's a 6-beat line that you may have heard, as I read, and Lattimore's translation reproduces that, sort of. I'll read you some opening lines from Lattimore's translation. He generally has 6 beats per line, although he doesn't attempt to reproduce the dactyls, but you can feel, if you listen carefully, and as you read you'll notice this as well, that there are 6 beats per line. The same lines that I just read in Greek are here in English. Sing, goddess, the anger of Peleus' son Achilles and its devastation, which put pains thousandfold upon the Achaeans, hurled in their multitudes to the house of Hades strong souls of heroes, but gave their bodies to be the delicate feasting of dogs, of all birds, and the will of Zeus was accomplished. Since that time when first there stood in division of conflict, Atreus' son, the lord of men, and brilliant Achilles. The dactylic hexameter line has a leisurely feel. C.S. Lewis describes it as having the feel of a wave rising and cresting before it falls on the shore and draws back. The dactylic hexameter is not represented exactly by English iambic pentameter, although many modern poets have translated Homer's Iliad with iambic pentameter. It works, it's satisfactory, but I like Lattimore's hexameter line better. He's fairly faithful. If you have a Greek text and you know enough Greek or can use Greek helps to see what is in the Greek, and you compare it with Lattimore, it's almost a line-by-line rendering of the Greek. Other modern translators do a good job of capturing the idea of the poem, but they play a little bit more fast and loose with the lines, and you can't look from one line in the translation to the same line in the Greek and find the same idea. So I recommend Richmond Lattimore's translation. Now, in Lattimore's translation, he has the lines laid out on the page in a poetic form, so his dactyls are laid out on the page. All good poetry should be read naturally, that is, it should be read according to the punctuation. One shouldn't simply stop at the end of a line and pause just because the line has come to an end. If there's no punctuation, one reads it naturally. But if the poet is a good poet, and Lattimore is a good poet, and Homer was a masterful poet, then the feel of the poetry will come through, even though you're ignoring the line breaks at the end of the line and reading according to punctuation. So I recommend Lattimore's. Lattimore's translation is the one that I'll be using as I talk in this course, and I'll be reading several passages as we go. I've given you the background on the history of the poem, talked a little bit about the Greek text, a little bit about translations. So in the next lecture, I'll be talking about the first several books of the Iliad. You can, at home, find a copy of the Iliad, find Lattimore's translation if you can, and I would recommend that you read the first 4 or 5 books. And my recommendation in reading the Iliad is to read as large a chunk at a time as you can. Read for 30 or 45 minutes at a sitting. Don't read a few lines, pause, and stare pensively off into space. Keep reading. You need to feel the sweep of the whole. C.S. Lewis, again, describes reading epic poetry as being similar to looking at a cathedral. The first thing you need to do when you want to appreciate a vast edifice like a cathedral is not to get up close and look at the joints between the stones and admire the sculpture of the toes on the statue, but to stand 300 yards off and take in the sweep and the structure as a whole. Look at the lines of the thing as a whole, and look at how all the large parts fit together. And then after you've circled around for a few hours looking at the cathedral from a distance, then you're in a position to get up close and appreciate the smaller details, because the smaller details can now be fit into your picture of the cathedral as a whole. And the same thing is true of an epic poem. You don't want to stop to savor little snippets of Homer's lines before you've appreciated the poem as a whole. Then you can go back and look at the little gems here and there. So read in great sweeping chunks. And I also recommend that you read aloud, because since this poem was composed to be heard in an oral setting by an audience, you want to try and recapture that feel if you can. Don't read silently any more than necessary. Try to read aloud, even if you're just murmuring under your breath. But read aloud and taste the poem with your tongue and your lips, and let the sound come into your ears too, rather than just seeing with your eyes. Tasting the words is something that the ancients knew about, and we can recover that as well. So read the first 4 or 5 books, read in large chunks, and you'll find that you can read an entire book of the Iliad in about 45 minutes. There are 24 books, and so you could read a book per day and get done in 24 days.